In this video, we are going to determine the quadrant or axis in which the terminal side of angle beta falls given these conditions. Now, of course, when we say something is less than 0, that's the same thing as saying that it is negative. When we say something is greater than 0, that's another way of saying that it is positive. So, we want to find the quadrant or axis where the sine of beta is negative and the cotangent is positive. Alright, so let's start with the sine. Now remember, if you think about the unit circle, the sine of any point on the unit circle is going to be the y value. Okay, this is the sine of any angle is going to be just the y value on the unit circle. So the question is, where is the sine function negative? Where are the y values negative? And so the y values will be negative below the x-axis. So right away that tells us that we are either talking about the third quadrant or we are talking about the fourth quadrant. Okay, these are the two places where the y values and therefore the sine function will be negative, less than 0. Now, we need to further narrow it down and decide in which of these two quadrants will the cotangent be positive, greater than 0. Well, look, we are more comfortable dealing with the tangent, and since the cotangent is just the reciprocal of the tangent function, and doing the reciprocal doesn't change if something is positive or negative. So tangent is going to be positive the same places where cotangent will be positive. So let's go ahead and ask ourselves, where will tangent be greater than 0? Where will tangent be positive? And we have learned in previous problems that tangent is positive in the first and in the third quadrants. Tangent is negative in the second and fourth quadrants. So therefore, since we want a positive tangent, then that tells us we had already narrowed it down to either the third quadrant or the fourth quadrant, but it is the third quadrant where tangent is positive. So that's why the answer is quadrant 3 for number 25. And just really quickly, one more time, the reason why I know that tangent is positive in the first and third quadrants while it is negative in the second and fourth quadrants is because, let's talk about x's and y's. In the first quadrant, the x's are positive and the y's are positive. In the second quadrant, the x's are negative and the y's are positive. In the third quadrant, the x's and y's are both negative, and in the fourth quadrant, the x's are positive and the y values are negative. Now, all you have to do is remember that tangent is sine divided by cosine. It's y divided by x. So for tangent, if you do a positive divided by a positive, you get a positive. That's why tangent is positive in the first quadrant. In the second quadrant, if you did y over x, you would have a positive divided by a negative, and that's a negative. Here in the third quadrant, tangent would be a negative divided by a negative, and that's a positive. And in the fourth quadrant, when you do sine over cosine, tangent would be negative divided by a positive, which is a negative. So that's how I knew in which quadrants tangent would be positive and in which quadrants tangent would be negative. Okay, what about number 26? Okay, let's start over here. Okay, so we want the quadrant where the cosine is positive, first of all. Now, on the unit circle, the cosine is the x value. So where are the x values positive? X values are positive to the right of the y-axis. So right there, that narrows us down to either the first quadrant or the fourth quadrant. Alright, so it's got to be one of these two quadrants so far. Now, in addition to that, the sign has to equal 0. Alright, now remembering that sine is the y value, where is the sine going to equal 0? Well, the y values are equal to 0 right on the x-axis. So remember, for example, look at these 2 points. This point on the left has the coordinates -1, 0. So there's your sine of 0 right there. And over here, this is the point 1, 0. And again, the y value is 0. So of course, between these 2 points, the one on the right is where the cosine is also positive. So that's it. So the terminal side must be on the positive x-axis. Okay, what's next? Number 27. Now the secant is the reciprocal of the cosine function. So we should be thinking, where is the cosine less than 0? Where is the cosine going to be negative? Okay, and of course the cosine on the unit circle is x value. So we need a negative x value. Meanwhile, cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine function, and we want the cosecant to be undefined. So think about it. If cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine function, that means 1 over sine of beta. Alright, and we want this to be undefined. Now, the only way this is going to be undefined is if the denominator is 0. Okay, because you can't divide by 0. So the question is, where is the sine function equal to 0? Now, this is just like what we were talking about a moment ago. The sine function is going to equal 0 right here on the x-axis. So we've narrowed it down to either the positive x-axis or the negative x-axis, because the y value, the sine of these points, are both 0. Alright, this being 1, 0, there's your sine function, and this being -1, 0, there's your sine function. So the question is, will it be the positive x-axis or the negative x-axis? Now, which one of these has a negative cosine? Cosine is the x value, so the x values are negative over here to the left, as you can see, the -1, for example. So there you go. It would have to be the negative x-axis to give you a negative cosine and a sine of 0, which will make the cosecant undefined. So negative x-axis. Okay, last one. Where is the tangent less than 0? Where's the tangent function negative? Now, in previous problems, we have learned that the tangent function is positive in the first and third quadrant, and tangent is negative in the second and fourth quadrants. Alright, so we want the tangent to be negative. So far that narrows us down to this quadrant and this quadrant. Okay, the second or the fourth quadrant. Now, in addition to that, we want the secant to be positive. Now, the secant is the reciprocal of the cosine function. Okay, so doing the reciprocal does not change whether something is positive or negative. So we want the cosine, therefore, to be positive, greater than 0. So which one of these two quadrants has a positive cosine? Well, cosine is the x value on the unit circle, and x values are positive to the right of the y-axis. Alright, so that narrows it down to this quadrant over here, quadrant 4. Alright, so there you go. This is the quadrant where cosine is positive. Therefore, the reciprocal of cosine, secant, is positive. But also, tangent is negative.